Welcome back to Liberty Bites on the Think Liberty Network. I'm your host, William Gadsden. You can follow me personally on Twitter at William_Gadsden and follow Think Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever your favorite social media outlet is. Give us a follow and a like for updates on new episodes and more. We also have a Patreon now, so if you'd like to support our work, check it out at patreon.com/ThinkLibertyPatrons. So before we get started with this new content, let's do a real quick review. I've talked before about how the best way for a political ideology to be brought into play in a country is to first divide the people. Machiavelli knew it, Marx knew it, Lenin and Stalin knew it. Now, back in the heyday of communism, it was all about splitting the population between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor. And that was easy in Tsarist Russia because the differences were so pronounced and the proletariat so poor, so genuinely oppressed. Now, in China, you had the Japanese ravaging the country, making the political atmosphere ripe for change once they were pushed out. Similar stories are found throughout South America and the Caribbean. Once the divide has been made, or disaster has struck and leaves opportunity in its wake, the time is ripe for the new political ideology to step in and save the day, or, kill millions of people. But as I've said before, modern Marxists and similar collectivists realized that the U.S. population as a whole was too well off, too comfortable to be split based on lines of wealth, at least not on wealth alone. So instead, they put together a far more ingenious, far more insidious plan. Highlight immutable characteristics that make up the population and hammer on those differences. Break the population up into categories based on things that they can't control. And in doing so, basic human tribalism will take hold, and they will do the rest themselves. And to help facilitate this plan, a new philosophy was born, that of critical theory and intersectionalism. Now, without getting too far into the weeds here, because I could do an entire episode on critical theory and intersectionalism, that's not what this is about. But the part of critical theory and intersectionalism as a philosophy is to support the dividing of people based on immutable characteristics by rewriting history or narrowing its scope in order for it to support the given narrative, while at the same time using things like newspeak, language, to further divide us. I mean, tell me the term people of color isn't just a polished way of saying everyone that isn't white. It is in this way that we have a huge push, along with political correctness in general, to divide the population. So now we have to constantly hear about how the West has committed so many terrible sins, that Christopher Columbus was some kind of bloodthirsty crusader. He actually allied himself with one tribe or another that were already at war with the other. That the Pilgrims genocided holy, peaceful, noble Native Americans for the first Thanksgiving, even though Native Americans had been slaughtering and enslaving one another for hundreds of years before Europeans got there, and they fought fiercely for and against Europeans once they arrived. The Europeans and early Americans are solely responsible for the evils of slavery and bigotry, and the white Christian males have been operating some sort of secret cabal for hundreds of years to keep down anyone that didn't look like them or believe like they do. It's time to say enough with these childish notions of good guys versus bad guys along clean, easily observable lines. These flimsy obfuscations of the history of mankind being about oppressed and oppressor. But here is the crux of the argument. There are crumbs of truth in all of it. Columbus did fight against and kill natives on his journeys. Some Europeans and Americans did practice the abominable practice of slavery. Bigotry does exist, and it always has. And some white Christian males have gone out of their way to oppress others, though not necessarily based on those characteristics or lack thereof. The thing is, though, every single other civilization in the history of the world has done the same thing. And within almost all of those civilizations, there are many who refuse to take part or actively fought against these things. But in order to realize that, one must broaden their scope past Western versus everyone else, or men versus women, or white people versus everyone that isn't white. The sins of humankind are legion, They span across every civilization, every race, every religion, every political group, and every era. We can't pretend that slavery didn't exist in ancient China or Tsarist Russia or feudal Japan, just as it did in Greece and Rome. We can't pretend that African tribesmen didn't sell their kin to Europeans and Arabs and North Africans, just like we can't pretend that open-air slave markets don't still exist today in North Africa and parts of the Middle East. We can't pretend that the Great Wall of China wasn't built on the bodies of those that built it, or that dictators like Mao and Pol Pot didn't kill their millions, just as Hitler and Stalin did theirs. We can't pretend that sex trafficking of children isn't just as prevalent across Asia and much of the Middle East, just as it is in Europe and America. No human, living or dead, has clean hands. This is where it comes down to the nature of man that I always harp on. That, as Hobbes said, the life of man in a state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. All men share this nature, not just white people or black people or Asian people or straight or gay, rich or poor. The nature of man is the great equalizer because we share it regardless of everything else. It is inescapable. And it is because of that nature that while we are all capable of doing great good or great evil, we are nevertheless prone to the latter. None of us are blameless. So take solace in this. We have all sinned and fallen short of whatever impossible standard that the left believes we are capable of. So instead of focusing on who has done what and when, let's move forward as best we can and understand that we all have the same potential to do great good or great evil to one another, and strive to do great good to your fellow man, regardless of what race, sex, or orientation you are, or what your hair or eye color is, whether you're handicapped or not, or what you call God. That's the only way we are going to move forward as a society, as a civilization, as humankind, instead of looking back. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time to become more liberty-centered with us. I'm William Gadsden with Think Liberty.